In the last video, if you remember, I was sweating because it was 90 degrees. Now, a couple weeks, less than a week later, it's almost freezing. That's Indiana weather for you. In this video, I was going to do it quite a bit differently. I was going to focus on another aspect of writing, but I saw the Ahsoka finale, and that changed things. I did not expect Dave Filoni to facepalm that badly. It was just embarrassing. When you have a guy who's worked with George Lucas, he's worked in this franchise for more than a decade, doesn't understand that a lightsaber can cut a stormtrooper in half with a flick of the wrist. So somehow he thinks zombified stormtroopers are a threat when they're not firing blasters against Jedi. That's basically like a Roger Roger droid coming at you with no blaster. That episode was so horribly bad. I decided to do something different with this video. As I said before, you can learn from other people's mistakes. So this video is going to be how to save Star Wars after everything they've done to it. Some people say it's lost, it's dead, it's gone, and if they keep going the direction they're going, yeah. But as a writer, how can you turn around something this bad? What you have to do is reboot it without rebooting it. Now, how do you do that? You move forward. You don't go back on the timeline and refilm stuff and change stuff around. The bad stuff you just ignore, and you go forward acting as if it never happened. Now, how can you do that with canon? It's like they already screwed canon over. Canon was broke with The Force Awakens, which I like to call The Farce Awakens. They broke it there. So you can't turn around and pretend, oh, we got to follow canon. It's gone. You broke it. And they didn't just stop there. They've been breaking it over and over and over. When I saw those badly choreographed fights, and I see lightsabers bouncing off the stormtrooper armor when they hit them, and then they throw a little CG cut mark on them, it's like, no. We saw Obi-Wan cut Darth Maul in half. Technically, we didn't see the blade go through him. We saw him fall apart afterwards. If you're not willing to do a fight like that correctly, if you're not willing to pay the money to do the CG, to see arms being cut off, or torsos bisected, or heads chopped off, then you don't construct that fight. You write it another way where you don't have to have that big budget. You write it in a way that's legit for the universe. You cannot retcon the lightsaber to say it can't cut people in half. We already have seen it can. Stormtroopers are one threat to Jedi. One threat. And that's if they can fire multiple blaster bolts at them so fast they can't block them all, and a few get through. Stormtroopers without blasters, which I don't recall, I watched it once. I don't feel like going back and watching it again. I don't recall them doing much firing with blasters. I thought they got up and started walking and trying to take them hand to hand. That's no threat to the Jedi. But Dave Filoni, they're scared. They got to back. They got to retreat. That's like you're going to the bowling alley and you're saying the pins are a threat to the ball? No. There is so much stuff wrong with not just this episode, but the franchise. And I was watching Clone Wars yesterday. I pulled out a DVD, Season 4, one where they're on Mon Calamari. And there's a special feature with Dave Filoni and 3 of the other guys that worked on it. And they're talking about stuff. And I'm starting to realize the writing was on the wall for all the way back in Clone Wars. He just cuts corners. And one of the corners he cut there was they had lightsabers underwater. And they said, well, shouldn't they be making bubbles? And they're like, well, we didn't have the budget to do bubbles on lightsabers. It would look cool, but we didn't have budgets to do bubbles on lightsabers, so we saved that to do bubbles on other stuff. So you see them swinging the lightsaber around underwater, but no bubbles, as if the blade doesn't do anything to the water. And then you look at Rebels, it's like, this guy cuts corners. I missed it. I missed it. I thought He was just getting a little sloppy. I thought, well, he's not too far off, but this episode of Ahsoka confirmed this guy does not know how to write science fiction. He writes it like it's not even fantasy. He doesn't even write it like it's fantasy. Fantasy still is consistent with itself. If you have a magic spell which you don't explain how it works, but you see what it does, you know it has to do that same thing over and over and over again. Absent the explanation, you still have to have consistency. When you see what lightsabers can do, you have to be consistent with that going forward. There is no excuse for that episode. Episodes 1 through 7, while there was some bad stuff in there, there was good stuff, and I could see a through line. I could see where it was going. I saw the potential in it. So I thought, okay, he's a little clumsy at spots, but he still has a plan. And then this one just completely facepalmed. I mean, a finale is supposed to leave you wanting to see more. This one is like... Apparently George Lucas does not have... He's like Donald Trump. Okay? Lots of people love George Lucas. Lots of people love Donald Trump. But they are not good at hiring subordinates. You look at Donald Trump and all the bad people he hired, and they backstabbed him. And then George Lucas put Kathleen Kennedy in charge of Lucasfilm when he sold it to Disney, expecting her to carry on his legacy. She even said, she promised on video, she would carry on his legacy. And as soon as she got in, the first thing she did is start destroying his legacy. And now Dave Filoni, he can't even hold himself to the physics of a lightsaber. So, if you're a writer and you're hired by Disney, fat chance on that. The corporate execs have to have no clue, or maybe they just aren't involved at all. Disney's having problems other than Star Wars. So hypothetically, they hire you to come in and fix Star Wars. What can you do with this mess? I mean, at this point, it is literally a clusterfuck. You cannot keep all the stuff they've put in canon, and I use canon loosely because they broke the original canon, and you can't make it work. You have to undo some of this, but you don't. Going back on the timeline and reshooting events like J.J. Abrams did in Star Trek, they go back to Kirk and Spock and they change stuff. That's not how you do it. You go forward. So at this point on the timeline, Dave Filoni, he teased Heir to the Empire in the trailers for Ahsoka. For those of you who don't know, Heir to the Empire was the first novel ever put out in Star Wars, and it was written like a movie. It was a trilogy: Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. Thrawn was the major villain in it. That was like a trilogy, and it read like a trilogy. It felt like a trilogy. People, when they got the books, it was like, yeah, these are the movies. We're not seeing it, but we're reading it. So when he says Heir to the Empire, it's a certain storyline. And basically, he's signaling to people, we're going to do that storyline, more or less. Now, Thrawn was not in another galaxy. He was in the unknown regions fighting enemies of the Empire for the Emperor. The unknown regions are kind of out in the sticks. So when all the stuff went down, when the Emperor fell, he couldn't get back right away. I mean, he probably didn't even hear about it right away. It's like if you were all fighting in the wilderness in northern Canada and you didn't know who won the Super Bowl for 2 months. So Thrawn was out in the unknown regions. So Dave Filoni makes it, oh, the space whales took his ship to another galaxy, and that's not good writing. But if I was doing this, I would keep that. He was in another galaxy. You don't have to explain why. And he came back. And that's what you start with. Thrawn coming back from another galaxy. He wasn't here for the fall of the Empire. The chain of command with the Emperor and Vader broke, and no one with sufficient gravitas stepped in to replace them. New Republic rose. Now Thrawn comes back. That's where you start, and you move forward. You ignore the bad stuff. The Mortis Gods, which Dave Filoni stuck in there at the end of the Ahsoka finale, you ignore those. I know George Lucas created them. It was a mistake on his part. He created them in Clone Wars. Stick with the canon established in the 6 movies. Use that as your canon. Everything else that came past since that, if it's good, use it. If not, ignore it. So, if I'm in charge, if I'm the writer, there are no Mortis gods. They never happened. And you construct Star Wars going forward with that in mind. You don't come out and make a public statement they're gone. You just, in your writing group, in the producers, you say, okay, they're gone. We're not going to say it, but they're gone. Never existed. So it's a reboot without rebooting it. You're moving forward based on a change in a retcon of the canon that the fans never see. And you have to retcon it to fix the stuff that's been messed up. Disney messed up most of it. George Lucas messed up a little bit. The Mortis gods are on Lucas. The World Between Worlds, that's all Dave Filoni. That was horrible. And I saw him making excuses on the behind the scenes of Rebels, saying, well, it's not really about time travel. Oh, these aren't really time portals. That's what they are. It's literally a portal you can step through time in. He had Ezra pull Ahsoka through one of them several years into the future. It's time travel. He messed up. And from that interview, I said he knew it. But what does he do? He puts it in Ahsoka. Instead of just ignoring it, he puts it in Ahsoka. And then he puts the Mortis gods. And he puts the Night Sisters. It's like every big mistake that's been made, he's sticking in there. So what do? You get rid of Dave Filoni as creative head. You put him back as an assistant. He's got skills. I'm not going to say he doesn't. But when it comes to driving the car, he can't navigate worth a damn. If he doesn't understand lightsabers chop through stormtroopers just like they chop through droids, he can't navigate. So use him as an assistant. Put someone in charge. Hell, I can't tell you who to put in charge other than me, and they'd never do that. I never would move to California anyway. Even though technically I could do it remotely, but I'm not telling you this as an advertising to them. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to get the mistaken impression that there's nothing that can be done. I heard that from Stargate when they made Stargate Universe. The writers on that show actually said, well, this is all the potential that's left in the series. Everything else has been explored. And in response to that, I rage wrote a pilot for Stargate, a new Stargate series called Return of the Ancients. Threw it up on fan fiction, and people absolutely loved it. I did it just to prove the point that there was a whole bunch of potential left in Stargate. And there's far, far, far more left in Star Wars. You've got a whole expanded universe of stuff to draw from if you're not that inventive. And I am that inventive, so I can do better. So, we're going to look at this as an object lesson and how you can take a messed up property and rejuvenate it without completely rebooting it. We're not recasting Luke Skywalker. We're not going back to the Death Star and changing stuff. No. We're picking up where Thrawn comes in and going forward. When Thrawn comes in, meaning he comes back into the galaxy. Again, I would not have put him in another galaxy. It's just bad writing, but when you've got a mess, you got to pick somewhere to start. So we're going to keep that and move forward. So we got a lot of mistakes to fix as best we can. Where do we start? Well, let's start with the first mistake I can remember Disney even making. As soon as they bought the franchise, they immediately canceled sales of Slave Leia costumes. No more metal bikinis. I think, why would they do that? It's in the movie. The messed up execs there didn't want Slave Leia costumes. Why not? They're messed up politics. That's the only reason they would cancel sales of that costume. You can probably still get the costume from others, but Star Wars official merchandise, I remember it being canceled, and that was the first thing they did. And I was like, uh-oh, this isn't right. They're going to screw things up, and they did. So how do we fix that? Well, Do we put another character in a bikini, metal bikini? No. We just got to get at this notion that, what is the notion? The Me Too movement. It may have started out legitimately victims of abuse coming together, but it turned into man hate, and that no women can be seen as attractive. It's like they will literally complain about girls walking down the beach in a bikini if a guy looks at them. And, well, it makes no... I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise if those kind of people are running Disney and Lucasfilm, they got rid of the Slave Leia bikini costume. So how do we fix that? Well, me doing my thing. Let me make this perfectly clear. This is like cleaning up a messy bedroom. There's not one way to do it. You can pick any corner, any spot in there. You just start cleaning and putting things right. So there isn't just one way to save Star Wars. There's many ways. This is how I would do it. You start by pulling a character from the EU that was Me Too-ish, or at least loosely associated with that, and you do the character right. For me, that character would be Admiral Dala. So, where are we on the timeline? They don't say, and that's a big problem. When is Ahsoka? Maybe someone said off-screen, but on-screen you never see. You start by giving little information. Rogue One did this well, okay? Props to Rogue One. When they came into a new planet, they gave the planet name on screen. And they threw up a bunch of them. That's the way you should do it. You should also say in the beginning, this is... However, the fans have always measured how many years past the Battle of Endor. You can do it that way, or you can get another time measurement there, but you need a time measurement. So the very first thing you see, we're writing a new series, okay? We're writing a new series for Disney, and the very first thing up there you're going to see, if you're not going to do the scroll, it seems like they banned the scroll. You can't do a scroll anymore. And then Ahsoka, well, they did a red scroll, and it wasn't at an angle. It's like, scroll or no scroll, just do it. Yellow letters at an angle, just do that. But apparently someone made a decision, we're not doing that anymore. You go back to doing the scroll, okay? So you can put the time in the scroll, or you can just put it as like a little header on the planet. So me, I'm saying do the scroll. And what would the scroll be? Well, it's always 3 paragraphs, and they're short paragraphs. So you would say, the Battle of Endor. You say something about the Battle of Endor. The Empire has fallen. The Emperor is dead. Chaos reigns. There is no legitimate ruler left, and they've broken up into various factions and warlords and whatever. Grand Admiral Thrawn has just returned, and he is beginning to reunite them. That sets the stage. And then when you see your first planet or whatever, you get the planet name, and you get the X number of years after the Battle of Endor. So you don't have to put the time in the scroll, you can put it on the little visual header. I heard someone say the Ahsoka finale was 10 years after Rebels, so that Thrawn was going to... Be careful when people say round numbers like that. Your inclination is take it exactly. Did they mean 10 exactly? Did they mean 8? Did they mean 12? That's why you got to put these up on screen and make it official, so you have a timeline and people can see what's going on. Especially when you're doing multiple series and they're not all chronological, you need to know when this is happening. So you put up the planet you're at, and then you put up, let's just say it's 9 years after the Battle of Endor. And then you start with your opening scene. What do you want for your opening scene? Well, you want to tell people this is real Star Wars, not the fanfic. I want to call him Jar Jar Abrams, just because he hates Jar Jar, but I like Jar Jar as a character, so I'm kind of split on that. But we'll go with Jar Jar Abrams' trilogy. He redesigned everything. He redesigned the Stormtroopers. He redesigned the Star Destroyers. He even made his own Death Star redesigned. The capital of the Republic was a different system. Everything. He couldn't carry forward anything. He had to. It wasn't the rebellion; it was the resistance. It's like, did this guy hate George Lucas that much? He had to rebrand everything. So, in order to tell the people immediately and visually, not in dialogue, but visually, that this is real Star Wars, you start with the view of an Imperial Star Destroyer, a real Imperial, not a reimagined one. We see it exactly as it was in the original trilogy. And it will be an Imperial class. A lot of people don't know there are different sized Star Destroyers. If you've read the books, the two you hear about the most are Imperial and Victory. Victory is smaller. I think the Star Destroyer you see in A New Hope at the beginning is Imperial. I'm not entirely sure. But Imperial is basically, Imperial class is the biggest Star Destroyer they have in the regular fleet. The Super Star Destroyer was built as a command ship after that. So it's the bread and butter ship. You show that, and immediately people recognize, oh, this is a Star Wars. And the Star Destroyer will be docked at an orbital facility around this planet. You already said what the planet is. Doesn't matter. You pick a planet we haven't seen before. And this ship is docking to pick up supplies. And you say that on screen. So after you see Planet X, 9 years after the Battle of Endor, it switches and you see Imperial Star Destroyer, blah, blah, blah. We'll just call it Judicator. I remember that name from the books. I don't remember who captained it, but we'll just call it Judicator. We'll call the series Judicator, just as a working title. So Imperial Star Destroyer Judicator docked with something station for routine cargo transfer. Okay? And then that's on screen for like a few seconds and it goes away. You've given people the setting, you've given people what's going on with just that little flash up on screen of information. No dialogue. And that's not in the scroll. You have to do that when you're setting the scene in a huge galaxy. You can't expect people to know where they're at just by looking at the planet. You have to do that. That little bit of writing changes. It's like if you're going to do a fight scene. Do you do it all in one cut, or do you split it up into 100 cuts, each half a second long? I remember seeing Resident Evil Apocalypse. And the fight scene at the end, literally every single shot was half a second long. Mila Jovovich would throw a punch, they cut to her throwing a kick, cut. It was not a fight. They filmed little movements and they layered in heavy sound effects to create the illusion that you were watching a fight when you weren't. You want to watch a fight, start to finish, one cut, one camera shot. You don't want to fake it. So when it comes to establishing a galaxy, you want to show them how big it is. You want to show them how diverse all the landscapes are. You can't just show them a green planet and say, okay, this green planet, which looks almost like this green planet, is different and it is. Specifically tell them what it is, where they're at, and what's going on. That little information, we'll just call it a blurb. That information blurb should be used to establish every space shot that's new. Every time you switch to a system, it should show it. If you switch back after being somewhere else, it should show it again. So you clearly know, as the viewer, where you are at. Little stuff like that makes a huge difference, and that's writing, or directing, you could say. I don't actually know how much they split that up. How much the director fills in, how much the showrunner control. The showrunner's in control of it all. So if things aren't going right, it's the showrunner's responsibility. But beyond that, I don't have any experience in working behind the scenes. I've just seen information about it. But whoever responsibility is, you need those information blurbs to set the scene. You can't let people's mind wonder, where are we at? They need to know immediately. So you have the Star Destroyer docked at this station. The blurb tells you what it is and that they're unloading. Star Destroyers do not have unlimited food. They have to take on supplies. They have to take on fuel. So they have to get it. So you can either use shuttles to get it there, you can dock with the station, or you can land on the planet. Now, original trilogy, we didn't know Star Destroyers could land on a planet. We saw Jedi cruisers taking off from Coruscant in a prequel, so now we know those big ships can. Can a Super Star Destroyer? That hasn't been established. But it's safe to assume Imperial-class Star Destroyers can, and with the stupid Ahsoka series, we see Thrawns, which should be Imperial-class, if I'm remembering right, hovering over a planet. So, yeah, you can go to the planet to get supplies, you can have the supplies brought up to you, or you can dock at a station. So this one's docked at a station. And then you cut to the inside, and you see an Imperial officer. And he's being followed by stormtroopers. And he's on the station. Now, how do you tell the fans that he's on the station instead of the Star Destroyer? When you switch the camera shot from the outside view to the inside view, you throw up another information blurb, and you say station docking port or something like that. These little blurbs, visual information, are critical. You can't leave it up to people's imagination. They're not going to know what's going on. You want them knowing what's going on. You want them to feel the grandness of how big the Empire actually is. You don't want, it's just a Star Destroyer. Well, it's this specific one. That gets the mind going, oh, how many are there? What are all their names? This station, oh, hey, how many of these stations are there? Are they designed differently? I mean, are they copy and paste? The more detail you add, the more lore points you add, the bigger the universe feels. So these blurbs are a way you can get that lore point in. And Rogue One did this with the planet names. So whoever did that in Rogue One, whoever made that decision, good job. Take it further. Start throwing other information out there. So we cut inside, and this Imperial officer, I don't even know what their ranks are. If it was Star Trek, he'd be like a commander. But he's walking there. He's got, I don't know, 2 dozen stormtroopers following him. And he comes up to the point where the station docks with the ship. And there's a guard point there, and there's people going through, and the guard is checking people in. Okay? So it's not like anyone can just walk on from the station. They have to show their clearance. And he asked this guy for his clearance, and the Imperial is like, puts his hands behind his back, stiff pose, and like, given my rank, I don't need to show you clearance. We're expected here. You're going to pass us through, and you're not going to inform anyone that we're here. Is that clear? And the guy there's like, yep. So whether he suspects he's ISB or whatever else, you don't know. And then they move into the ship. So you're thinking, as the fans, you're thinking, is the captain in trouble? I mean, what's going on here? Truth is, that's not an Imperial officer, and those are not stormtroopers. So they get into the ship, and they make their way through, and this is a writing point I'm adding. I don't know if it's been established or not, but there should be a guard checkpoint before you can get to the bridge. So you would also need to establish what the blueprints of a Star Destroyer are. And just like people go online and they make up blueprints of a house they want to live in, you can do that with a Star Destroyer. Every deck, every room, every hallway, get it set in stone. What is an Imperial Star Destroyer like on the inside? Don't leave it up to different shows and different producers and different directors to make their own version. You set in stone what the blueprints for that Star Destroyer are, and you use it throughout the series. The bridge is at the top of the neck. It comes off the triangle. So I'm saying there should be an elevator up to the bridge, and the entrance to that elevator should have guard points on it. So not just any crew member can get to the bridge. I would say there's 2 stormtroopers there. So this guy walks out, kind of like blasters pull apart. He's walking through with his phalanx to this checkpoint. And they're both armed. It's like, we're going to need to see some identification, or you weren't summoned to the bridge. What's going on? And the Imperial officer just throws both his hands up like this, and the guns on the stormtroopers go up into the air. They're still holding on to them, but now they're pointed at the air, and one guy actually triggers a blast. And when that blast hits the ceiling, it blows up the ceiling. This is a very subtle thing you need to understand. Blasters are called blasters because they blast stuff apart. The very first scene in A New Hope, what do we see? stormtroopers boarding a ship, and when they're firing, the walls are blowing apart because the missiles hit the walls. It's lazy writing later when you say, oh, they just put a little black mark on the walls. No, they're supposed to blast apart stuff. So the very first time in this series, this Judicator series, we see a blaster fire, it's going to shoot the ceiling, and it's going to be like a crater, like that big, and smoke. So blasters blast stuff. This immediately tells people, oh, blasters are a serious weapon. They're just not a little squirt gun. No, they're a serious weapon. So Imperial officer throws his hands up like this and pulls the blasters up, and then the stormtroopers behind him fire 2 stun blasts into them, and they crumple. One blaster falls, the other is still held up there, and he pulls it to them with the Force, because this is not an actual Imperial officer. He looks at it and says the serial number, not serial, the type. He specifically says what type of blaster this is, and he says, I gave you guys 2 newest stuff, because the blasters they're holding are newer, better models. And it's like, the supplies on this ship must be really limited if they're using these older models. So right there, what does that do? It tells you, not only is the guy not an Imperial officer, he can use the Force, he's saying these troops with him, they're not actual stormtroopers. And these guys are just imposters coming here. And it says the Empire, at least this piece of the Empire, is experiencing shortages. They're not fully funded anymore. So just that little bit of dialogue there and that action, you're filling in the scene, what this is on the timeline. The Empire has not completely collapsed, but it's in trouble. So yes, it's an Imperial Star Destroyer, but they're short on supply, so they're actually using older weapons. They're issuing older weapons to these stormtroopers because they don't have enough of the new models. It's like a year or 2 ago, there was the cost of used cars skyrocketed because there weren't enough new cars for people to buy, so they had to go buy old ones. So that's basically what's happening to the Empire, this piece of it anyway. And you establish that in that little scene without hitting on the head and just telling people what it is. They have to infer, okay, why are they using outdated stuff? But before they can think it through in detail, they get on the elevator, and the first group of them go up with the Imperial officer. The next group, they have to go up later because the elevator is only so big. So they go up to the bridge, doors open, he walks out, the captain kind of stands up and looks around, like, what are you doing here? And then the stormtroopers come through, and there should also be guards on the bridge. Okay? There should always be at least two stormtroopers on the bridge. So these stormtroopers come out, and they immediately stun those guys. And then a few other people pull out blasters. I guess the captain pulls out a blaster, but the Imperial officer just, and again, he grabs the weapon and points it up at the ceiling. But with her, Captain Sadala, does a Mary Poppins, he actually pulls it up so hard, she doesn't let it go. She's actually a foot off the ground and just hanging there. Now, you could say she held on that long, but that's, why wouldn't she let go? Well, you change it. You make it, he didn't just grab the gun, he grabbed her wrist, and he pulled her up there, and he's hanging her from the air like that. His stormtroopers come in, they shoot the other people with stun blasts. Again, why stun blast? Why aren't they using kill? It's a story point. You don't know it yet, but it matters later. They stun various people that pulled out weapons, and then the rest of them, it's like they're all surrendering. It's like the bridge workers, they're not going to mess with this. And then you see one of the stormtroopers walk around. They look at, do you want that one stunned? He says, yeah. So they just fire a stun bolt into Dala. She passes out, and he drops her on the ground. And then it cuts. And it will be when Dala wakes up later. So that scene right there, what does it do? It tells you this is legitimate Star Wars because we're going back to the original trilogy. It's after it, but we're still using our original trilogy technology. Stormtrooper armor, Star Destroyers, blasters. And we're actually going back and making the blasters real. They fire stun. We saw the stun blast in A New Hope. They blow up stuff they hit. They hit walls, they blow it up. We see all the bridge crew wearing the proper uniforms. The consoles look like they did in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and it's all practical sets. This is not a... This series, Judicator, about half of it would be filmed on a Star Destroyer. So you build practical sets for the first one, and you can reuse them in all the other episodes going forward. It keeps it consistent, which is good from a writing standpoint, and it also keeps the budget low because you're reusing the same sets. So you would go all out in making really badass bridge set. And then you would also, later on, show other parts of the Star. We've never really seen a Star Destroyer other than the bridge or the hangar bay. In Rebels, they did the cliche, what do we want to call it? Freighter and the crew and going on adventures, and that freighter is their home, and blah, 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 blah. It's like Serenity from Firefly. It's the same thing. Well, in this show, your Serenity, your ghost, would be an Imperial Star Destroyer. That's where be your home base for the show. So you would actually go through and you would expand and add to what we know about a Star Destroyer from the original trilogy. By expanding that, you're keeping people in the mindset, this is the original trilogy, this is real Star Wars. We're seeing parts that we never saw before, but they all make sense. They all fit. They all look the same technology. You're not going crazy with new stuff. I mean, it's new because you haven't seen it before, but it's a continuation of the technology from before. So you're giving people new stuff without giving them crazy new stuff. You want to establish a firm base to start with. And then you can start doing some of the crazy stuff. And by crazy, I don't mean stupid. I don't mean inconsistent. I don't mean dumb like Mortis. I just like another alien race you've never seen before. You don't start off with that. You start off with the familiar. You start off with the Imperials. What is Star Wars without the Empire? In writing, they've tried to do that. It doesn't work very well. The Yuuzhan Vong, I give them credit for trying something new and kind of making it work, but an alien race that is not susceptible to the Force, that pretty much breaks Star Wars. You can't Force listen, you can't... It breaks Star Wars. Now, that opening scene, you go back. You see him Force lift the guns up. But think, wait a minute. When he got into the ship without having to show ID, that was actually a Jedi mind trick. He didn't wave a hand. But it was a Jedi mind trick. So when you first see it, you don't think it's a Jedi mind trick. Because he doesn't go, and he doesn't say the cliche. You don't want to say the cliche line. Dave Filoni makes this mistake. He takes lines from previous movies and stuff, and he just repeats them. He may change a word or two. It's like, you don't make it that obvious. If they're trying to infiltrate this, they're going to act like Imperials. That's why that conversation, when he got on there, sounded like an Imperial conversation. It also establishes you can do a mind trick without waving the hand. I saw one... There were episodes of Clone Wars that got started in like pre-visualization, and they never got finished. And I saw some of those on YouTube, and it's like there's this huge kyber crystal meant for the Death Star, and they intercept it. And Obi-Wan and Anakin are lifting it up. It's like, well, just use your other hand. It's like, you don't have to use your hand to use the Force. How do I know this? Well, it makes sense, but we see in Return of the Jedi, Luke's tied up, and he's able to lift 3PO in a chair without waving a hand. You can use the Force without using your hand. So why does Obi-Wan in A New Hope do this? Well, let's just say it's easier to use the Force by using your hand. It's like a training tool. So instead of just sitting there and doing it all with your mind, you connect your mind to your hand, so every time you use your hand, it's easier to make the connection. See, this is writing something new that explains something old. So if you're really distracted and stuff, you use the hand, and it's like muscle memory. And if you're really distracted and you don't use your hand, you might not be able to do it. But if you're calm and collected, you don't need to use your hand to use the Force. Also, when you have both Luke and Anakin losing their hands, and they got droid replacements on, obviously those droid replacements are not channeling the Force because they're not part of your actual body. So you establish in this scene, without actually saying it, you don't have to use a physical motion to use the Force. And people won't know that the first time they see it. They will go back. Oh, now that makes sense. And that's the way you want to write deep storylines. You don't always get it on the first. You're not so obvious. You deliver everything to them on the first view through. You are looking into a universe that you don't fully understand. That's the way you want to see this. The universe makes sense if you know everything. But if this is the first time seeing it, you're not going to fully understand it. So that, after you see him pull the blasters with this, you start thinking back and like, oh, that was a Jedi mind trick. So in this first scene, we are basically going back to the original trilogy and reminding people what it was by giving them a continuation of it. The technology, the Force techniques, blasters actually blasting stuff. It's the good old days already, and you've only spent a few minutes on screen. So, after the first scene, where do you go from there? Well, you go with Dala. She wakes up in her quarters on board the Imperial Star Destroyer. She's got handcuffs on and she's got ankle cuffs on. And she's laying on her bed. And she's there for a little bit, tries to wiggle around, but then the door opens and the Imperial officer comes in who's actually a Jedi. He's not in Jedi robes, he's still in the uniform. But she got Force lifted up by her wrist, so she kind of knows this guy can use the Force. And here's the thing with the whole Me Too movement. There would be execs saying, we cannot show a woman tied up on a bed. Absolutely not. Oh, you ask them why not? Don't ask why. We just can't. It's like, that's the kind of dumbass thinking that got the slave Leia costumes pulled. They were making money off those costumes. People wanted them. Why would a corporation throw away a little bit of free money like that? Because they're dumb. And they got the wrong motives. Any society, anywhere, if your beliefs cannot be questioned, if they cannot be analyzed, if they cannot be explained, your beliefs suck. It's not a belief. It's, what's the right term for it? It's fascism. Now people think, whoa, fascism, Nazis. Like, the definition of fascism is you use force to compel people to do or not do what you tell them. So you do as I say, or that's fascism. So in a corporate setting, it's you do it this way, don't ask questions, or you're fired. You don't do it our way, you're fired. So it's financial instead of literal death. So we have Dala. Dala is a red-haired female, say 40-ish, but not old 40-ish, young 40-ish. She's tied up on the bed. She's still wearing her Imperial uniform. But she's got handcuffs on and she's got ankle cuffs on. She wakes up after being stunned. Who knows how long she's been there. This Imperial officer comes in and they start chatting. And she is basically, I would write the character, not exactly as the books, but I would start out as that she is someone who has never smiled for the past decade. Her being in the Imperial fleet and in that environment, the books say basically she had to work twice as hard to get where she was because it was a man's club only. And if you look back at the original trilogy, you don't see female officers. So that's legit. We'll use that. We'll go with that. And if you want to make it more like Hollywood, they basically had to sleep around in order to advance anywhere. And she wasn't down with that, so she had a very hard path getting up to Admiral. But she got demoted. An instance that will come up in this conversation. She got busted down to captain of a freighter. She wasn't even on warship. Then the Empire falls. This is all going to be revealed in this conversation in little snippets. The Empire falls, and it fractures because there's no... See, we're getting history about what happened in the gap between the Battle of Endor and now, over 9 years, in this conversation, even though the conversation isn't all about that. You just throw it in little bits and pieces. He knows this about her. The Jedi knows this about her because it's revealed he's seen her Imperial record. And he knows about the incident that got her demoted. All the way down there. And he can read between the lines in the Imperial record. It's basically another Imperial officer made an advance on her. She basically said, I'm not having anything to do with that. And out of revenge, she got busted down the captain and stuck on a freighter. Imperial Command then found out about this, and they busted him down, but they did not reinstate her. So they basically said that other Imperial officer acted inappropriately. We can't tolerate that, but they didn't reinstate her because she wasn't all that popular. So she has this lingering grudge against the Imperial brass and against the men. So the Jedi, seeing this in her record and just making a few guesses, he deliberately puts her in cuffs on the bed in this very situation that she would never want to be in, basically what she turned down. And she wakes up there, he's there, and she immediately thinks this is a bad situation. This is torture, rape, maybe then execute her, whatever. She has no idea what's going on other than they took her ship. They were wearing Imperial, they took her ship. And he's got force power, so not actually an Imperial officer. This conversation goes on a bit, back on where she is grumpy. She is, like, again, not smiled in 10 years. Always stern, always defiant, not too flippant. But it's like she's a stone mask you're not going to get through. And he's feeling her out in this conversation, both trying to get information and through the Force. Remember, Force cannot read minds, but it can sense emotions. So eventually he senses an open, or what, and he force lifts her up off the bed. So she's sitting down on the bed. He lays her back and then just raises her up and hangs her there like a foot above the bed and just holds her there. It's like she can't move or wiggle around much. And the way you do that with the Force, you need to show her clothing compressing at various spots, like it's an invisible hand grabbing. You don't just levitate her like it's... When you grab something with the Force, there's going to be a crunch. So you see her constrained a little bit, not just the cuffs. He walks up and he pulls off her right boot. And he pulls off her sock, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be some Me Too moment, horrible thing, blah, blah, blah. We'll never put this... And then he just starts tickling her foot. And she resists it. I mean, stone face. And the camera goes onto her face, and it's like, over. It's like, and you start to see a little crack, and after 10 to 15 seconds, she just starts bursting out laughing. And you throw the scene completely opposite of what people's expectations were. With the whole Me Too movement, they expect every guy to be a sex-obsessed freak and women to be victims. And so you create this situation, and you do the exact opposite. And she just starts cackling. And eventually he stops, and then her stone face kind of comes back, but not completely. And he says something like, I broke you, now you're mine. And then she starts to object, and he just drops her on the bed. Then he grabs the keys and then just force tosses them so she can unlock herself. It's like, you took the scene, you took the stereotype that everyone's afraid of, oh, we can't put that on a scene, blah, blah, blah. If these people are afraid of a slave Leia costume, there's no way the executive people would go for that. And that sort of bullshit is what's killing Star Wars. So you throw it directly in their face. And this works not just for the fans, it works for the story. Because Dala had that backstory, and she had that resentment and fear regarding men's sexual predatoriness, or whatever you want to call it. This guy's a Jedi. Jedi don't mate. Jedi don't... Some people think you have to get your sexual fetish in some way, somehow. No, you don't. Jedi don't. It's like, Sexuality has a strong influence on the weak-minded, and that paraphrases the Force having an influence on the weak. So basically, when you're a teenager, it consumes you because all teenagers are weak-minded. But as you grow and as you level up in mental strength and wisdom and maturity, it suddenly doesn't matter anymore. Now, a lot of people don't grow up, so they're obsessed with it their entire life. You don't want to teach kids. Think about the next generation. Yes, you're trying to bring back the old fans, but you also want to teach the next generation. The Me Too movement teaches all men are evil. That's not what you want to teach. So you put the people with that stereotype watching this scene, they're going to assume it's going to go one way, and then you do the exact opposite. And this guy, he's a Jedi. I mean, even if it was consensual, he wouldn't do it. Why wouldn't he do it? Because it's a weakness. And that comes up in the conversation after this too. So Dala goes from expecting the worst to suddenly finding a guy that she doesn't have to fear taking her to bed in handcuffs, because Jedi don't do that at all. Not because they're holding themselves back, not because they're tempted and they just, or some rule, they just don't want to. They'd rather be out saving people's lives than getting laid. That's a key part of the Jedi. Actually, it's a key part of combat anywhere. You don't want people... When you get turned on, you get stupid. It's like getting drunk. So the Jedi, we're not going to do that. Jedi don't drink either. And yes, you saw Obi-Wan at the bar getting a drink. It's like, is he just that far gone? It's like, no, Jedi would not drink. Jedi would not do drugs. Anything that affects the mental state, they would not do. Which is why Jedi don't have sex. Which is why they don't have romantic relationships. They need to be clear-headed and ready to jump into trouble at a moment's notice. So throughout this conversation and this scene, you go from expecting one thing and you get something completely... And we see part of the Jedi. He's not afraid to touch her or to touch her foot. It's like, if you don't have sex, it's not you're afraid of it. It's just you just don't do it. So there's no fear there. There's no mental handcuffs on yourself. Me Too movement wants all men to be in mental handcuffs. They have to ask permission to do everything. It's like the Jedi, do whatever he wants. If he wants a force lifter and tickle his friend, yeah, they do it. Whatever. There's no rules. To quote Doctor Who, good men don't need rules. And that's the way the Jedi are. You can't look at the Jedi code as handcuffs. It's just wisdom, and it's a reminder of the way to do things. It's not a rule. So in this scene, this is scene number 2, you have a whole bunch going on and a whole bunch being established. And it's not just a info dump. It's a back and forth, and you see both characters. And with Dala, that laugh, it was rejuvenating. Even though she didn't want to laugh, she didn't do it on purpose, she couldn't help it because she's actually ticklish. It unblocked something in her. So when she puts her stone mask back on, it's like 80%. And he can sense it because he can sense her emotions. She's not as locked up anymore. So he did her a big favor. He wasn't tickling her foot because he wanted to tickle her foot, because he has a foot fetish. He was doing it to help her. And he was doing it in a mocking way, because he knew from her record what had been going on, or some of what had been going on, and how she was fearful of Imperial officers taking advantage of her and leveraging her. You can't get a promotion unless... And he just mocks it. He mocks it also to help her. So you start to see in this scene, all the stuff he's doing, your knee-jerk reaction to it is not accurate. And you start to see the real character of a Jedi here. It's not about rules. It's not about being stoic, because he's not stoic. I mean, he's not quite Kanan, but he's loose. He's also silent when he needs to be. It's like his emotional state adjusts to the situation it needs to be. He's not a Qui-Gon who's always in monotone. He can be silly if there's a reason to be silly. So tickling her foot is silly, but it serves a purpose. He's helping her break through this emotional barrier that if you've been serving in the Imperial Navy for, let's see, she would have been, if she's 40-ish, she would have been in there at least 20, 25 years. That's going to take a toll on you. I mean, you're going to be kind of wrecked inside because the Empire doesn't reward good deeds. They punish good deeds and they reward bad deeds. Part of her wants to do the right thing, but practicality-wise, she can't in the Imperial fleet. And when you read the books about Dala, she goes bad guy, really bad guy. And then they kind of give her an arc at the end where she meets an old lover or friend or whatever, and it kind of turns her around. She's not pure evil. She's I would write her as someone that doesn't have a strong moral compass. So she kind of goes whichever way the wind blows. And in the Empire, it blows dark side. So what happens is she comes in contact with the Jedi. And the Jedi, he's blowing light side. What happens to her character then? You see her coming out of the Imperial fleet. And then you start a path of character growth that goes throughout the series. And that foot tickling thing, which on the surface, you're going to have people mad as hell because apparently you can't see a naked foot girl in cuffs being tickled, which is ridiculous. I mean, you see a girl walking on a beach in a bikini, that's way more skin than the foot. But the people who think that way don't think logically anyway. They basically choose a belief and then you do as I say, or it's fascism. Fascism doesn't operate on logic. It operates on do as you say, or do as you're told. Do as I say, do as you're told. So in 2 scenes, we've established the original trilogy, and we have established 2 new characters. Both we've seen before. Now this Jedi, we haven't seen him, but we've seen Jedi before. And we start to see a new side of Jedi. And this is the no dating, no mating Jedi. I mean, it's referenced as part of the Jedi Code, which Anakin breaks. And then we also see Obi-Wan kind of breaking it with Satine. And then we see Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade getting married and having kids. It's like, we need to fix this. I know Timothy Zahn wrote that before the prequels came out, so he didn't know. But we got to fix this. Jedi don't get emotionally involved. Why? Because you can't do everything in life. You got to pick and choose. You don't have time to do everything. So if Jedi are going to specialize in saving people, they don't have time to get laid. They don't have time to raise a family and all that other stuff. So they choose not to go down that path. And frankly, if you're a real Jedi, you don't regret it. It's like, oh, I wish I could have it. No. What I'm doing now is way more important. I don't regret it. This is the way I'm supposed to be. Just like Dala, as you're going to figure out later, her character, she doesn't want to be anywhere else other than on the bridge of a warship. And in a future conversation, you're going to explain why. She doesn't want to be helpless. She has seen other people basically run over by the Imperial War Machine or others. I mean, the Star Wars galaxy is huge. It's not just the Empire out there. I remember watching this episode of Clone Wars, and they referenced there's at least 1 million planets. Not all of those are in the Empire. Not all of those are in the Republic. And this series, we're calling it Judicator, it doesn't take place in any of the known systems. It takes place in the fringe. Now, it gets a bit complicated. But basically, this Jedi's been around for quite a while. He was around when the Old Republic fell. Or when the Republic fell. You say New Republic, Old Republic, but then Old Republic also means the video games and Knights of the Old Republic, so we gotta fix that. So when the Republic fell, when Yoda failed to protect the Order and the cities took over, this Jedi was still around, but he was not part of the Order. He was out elsewhere. It's like, okay, did he leave the Order? Where did he come from? There's a whole story there, but you don't get it shown right up front. So you start getting bits and pieces. You tease it. It's like puzzle pieces. You don't dump the whole box of 1,000 pieces in people's laps. You just start throwing them out. And you let them start to try to make connections. You're going to do it with him, and you're going to do it with Dala. Later on, you find that Dala doesn't want to be helpless. She doesn't want to be on the surface being bombarded from space, just waiting to die, nothing to do. So she wants to be in the action. She wants to be the one making the decision who lives and who dies. Because otherwise she has to rely on other people, and she's found other people are not reliable, and she's seen so many people get murdered under the Empire. The only safe place for her is to be on the bridge of the Star Destroyer, because the Star Destroyer is the ultimate power of the Empire. So she doesn't want to get laid. She doesn't want to have a family. She doesn't want to do anything. Her place is on the bridge of a Star Destroyer. And the Jedi figures that out. So he's taking control of this ship. Okay? When she wakes up in her quarters, he already has full control of it. She doesn't see it. She'll see it in the next scene. He's taken full control of the ship and disconnected it from the station, and they've jumped out in hyperspace. He was going to take the ship anyway. He knew about her because he has an association with a hacker, and that hacker was able to get his Imperial file. When they get to their destination in hyperspace, there's going to be a conversation. Oh, first, in that bedroom scene, he references her Imperial file and says, I know a hacker, or I have an associate who is a very good hacker. As soon as you say associate who has a very good hacker, a few people's radar is going to pop up. Because if from the Heir to the Empire trilogy, that means something. It means Ghent. You don't say the word Ghent, you just say an associate with a hacker. Some people will pick up on that, they won't later. So the Jedi, not all Jedi have the same skills, and they don't all have the same level of skills. This Jedi is very good at reading people. So the emotional reading power, which he's going to refer to it as empathy. She's going to ask, are you reading my mind? Are you a telepath? And he's going to explain, well, Jedi can telepathically speak to each other, but they can't read minds. So right there, also in that bedroom scene, we've got so much going on in the conversation and lore of that bedroom scene. The execs at Disney won't understand it. Oh, tickling in the foot, we can't do that. It's like, this is why you can't trust people who aren't writers to make writing choices. You can't trust people who aren't Star Wars fans to write Star Wars. It's like, oh, J.J. Abrams, he's a huge Star Wars fan. It's like, no, he's not. If he's willing to violate A New Hope in order to make his movie, he's not a real Star Wars fan. And if he's willing to give Spock a girlfriend, he's not a Star Trek fan. Okay? Fans don't deliberately destroy the franchises. So J.J. Abrams is not a Star Wars fan. I reject that notion. I don't care if he says it. He's not. He broke it on purpose. So, in this bedroom scene, a whole bunch of lore is being added and being fixed. Jedi telepathically can speak to each other, but they cannot read minds. That's established there. That fixes the J.J. Abrams mess from the sequel trilogy. It retcons the retcon and brings it back to the original canon we saw in the 6 movies and Clone Wars. In Clone Wars, we see the 2 interrogation sequences, and they can't read the minds. It makes it crystal clear. But they can read emotions, and this Jedi is extremely good at that, and he's been doing it for years. We'll say he's about 70 years old, but he looks like he's 25, 30. There's also a reason for that, which will be explained much later. They go through this long conversation, the Jedi and Dala. Eventually, she takes her cuffs off, and he says, walk with me. And they end up going to the bridge. And when they get there, they pop out of hyperspace, and they're not at a planet. Remember, you don't have to go to a planet in hyperspace. You can just stop halfway. So what he did, in order to meet clandestinely, you have a hyperspace route, and we're saying they go in a straight line. There's no curving in hyperspace. We're making that official without actually coming out and saying it. So everything in this series will operate on straight line hyperspace routes. So here's the system, planet system, where they hijacked the Star Destroyer. And here's the end of a regular hyperspace route. So we'll do it this way. Here's one, here's the other. They go here. So they deliberately go off it to a pre-designated rendezvous out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there. They know it's clear. Now, how do they know it's clear? Well, if you have a map and the hyperspace routes are confirmed, you don't know what's in between. But space is open. I mean, you can use telescopes and stuff to see, is there stuff in between? So smugglers and other savvy navigators, they can go off the routes in certain areas where they know there's no nebula or asteroids, and they can just rendezvous there. So the normal traffic from that system to the other will go through here. They can't see them here. I mean, they are literally a few light years away from there. So the Star Destroyer comes out at this pre-designated rendezvous point, and there's some ships already there. Not big ones, a medium-sized ship. And you find out they're not Jedi's people. Okay? Those stormtroopers were. You also find out they're not stormtroopers. You find out they're not stormtroopers when, in that first scene, when Dalla's doing the Mary Poppins, and the stormtrooper asks, "Do you want this one too?" That's when you finally figure out they're not stormtroopers. Why? Because of the voice. It's the voice of a clone. Tamura Morrison, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He'd be the voice. And suddenly wait a minute, what the hell is going on here? I should have said that first. I didn't, sorry. So when they get to this rendezvous, you have these ships. They're like big freighters and other stuff. And this was all planned out. They were hijacking the Star Destroyer, and then they're going to come here, and those smugglers are going to strip the ship of all the stuff that the Jedi doesn't want to keep. So the TIE fighters, the Imperial walkers, the barracks, some of the shuttles, and a bunch of equipment he doesn't want. And he's going to sell it to them. And who's the smuggler? It's Talon Karrde. He comes on with his crew to the Star Destroyer. He's basically told Dalla, you can tag along, just don't say anything. Or I can just cuff you up again. So she's going along with him. And he took her rank insignia, okay? When she's lying on the bed, in the uniform, the insignia is gone. It's kind of a slap in the face. You're no longer captain, blah, blah, blah. But he brings her along, and Talon Karrde and his crew come on board. And Talon Karrde, in my estimation, he would be someone kind of like Iron Man. Okay? Definitely with a goatee, but just not quite as zany. To me, that's Talon Karrde. Now, that actor is probably too old for Talon, but that gets your head in the ballpark. He comes on board with the crew, and it's prearranged. They're coming on to strip it of the stuff the Jedi doesn't want, and they're going to pay him for that. And you find out he sends some of his stormtroopers, which aren't stormtroopers, with them to oversee it. And Karrde sends his people to get ahead, and he just stays there to talk with the Jedi. And from that talking, you realize they've had an ongoing business relationship for years. And the Jedi has been stealing other ships and other stuff. And he's been selling them to him, and he's been buying equipment from Talon. And you also layer in there, Talon's not the only one he's working with. He's working with other smugglers and too, but Talon is his favorite. So he's giving him the big score, the stuff off the Imperial Star Destroyer. And the AT-ATs alone, Talon says, well, the TIE fighters, it's better if we break it down into parts and sell the parts because we can get more than that. But there are a few warlords out there I know. They want the AT-ATs whole. I've already got them lined up as potential buyers. I've been looking for this. Thanks for finding some for me, that sort of thing. So you establish a relationship between Talon Karrde, which comes from the books, from Heir to the Empire and this Jedi. They've been working together. You also, I know this is a little controversial, one of the crew members he brings on board and then sends off with the stormtroopers to start inventorying what they can and cannot take. Back that up. The ships there, most of them are Talon Karrde's ships. One or two of the small ships are the Jedi's, okay? And they have crew. So he basically has a replacement crew for the crew of the Imperial Star Destroyer, a skeleton crew. So it's one of those guys that goes off with Talon Karrde's people to help inventory. And the stormtroopers, which are actually clones, more than just one of them, they go with them to make sure they don't touch anything, they don't touch whatever. So you have to have the Jedi's other people there. They didn't all sneak on board. And the hyperspace jump is just one jump, so they didn't stop anywhere else to pick them up. So they were already waiting there. See, all these little details matter, and you got to go back and forth and make sure things line up. You tell a story with the obvious dialogue, and you also tell the story with other little Easter egg isn't the right word, but other stuff you lay in there. George Lucas said Star Wars, half the storytelling is visual. So like in Revenge of the Sith, where you have the big battle in the beginning, and Anakin and Obi-Wan are flying Jedi starfighters, and they say lock S-foils in attack position. Well, Jedi starfighters don't have S-foils, but whoop, out they come. And they look like TIE fighters. So you are visually telling the progression of the technology and how Anakin goes from piloting a Jedi starfighter to a TIE fighter in A New Hope. You tell a story on multiple levels. It's not just dialogue. So when Talon Karrde brings his posse on board, basically, and sends them off, he said, you haven't met this one before. She's a new hire. She's been with me for a few months. She's going to oversee the inventory. And her name's Mara Jade. And Talon Karrde is looking at him very closely. And he's looking at him so closely, the Jedi realizes he's looking at him closely to see his reaction. Because Talon Karrde suspects she has abilities. She doesn't recognize the Jedi. I mean, she doesn't sense anything. It's like she's completely oblivious. She goes off. He turns his head, kind of watching her. And then he turns back to Talon's like, what are you playing at? And there's a little discussion there about, does she have force powers? I'm just a little curious. And the Jedi pretty much says, yeah, she does. I can sense it. Now, right there, what are we doing? We're establishing a new force power. If you look what Dave Filoni has done, he hasn't added anything. Ahsoka is a Jedi trained by Anakin Skywalker of the Old Republic. Are we learning anything new about the Force? No, we're not. So right here, this is the third scene. We're going to establish a new force power. We've already seen Mind Trick. We've seen Force Lift. No, the tickling wasn't a force power. That's just your fingers. This is a new force power. And it's basically a power check. So it's basically you send a little pulse out, and it reflects a force pulse, and it reflects off midichlorians. So the people with the higher midichlorian counts will flash back a larger amount. It's also a life form check. So you know how Star Destroyers and other ships always say, oh, let's scan a planet for life forms. You see that in Star Trek a lot. How are they doing that? Well, the Jedi, they have a force power to do it. And they can just basically detect where there are midichlorians. It's a little pulse. So when Mara Jade is walking past him, he does this little pulse to see, and he gets a big bounce back from her, but he also sees her twitch. He sees her twitch because she felt it. If you're not force sensitive, you don't notice, you don't know what's happening. So he got the pulse back from her, which indicates she has a pretty good midichlorian count, and he got the twitch out of her, which says, yeah, she is aware. You're not going to be aware if you haven't had training. So if you didn't have training, but you had little Anakin, over 20,000 midichlorian count, but no training, he might feel a little weird. He might say, somebody let the breeze in or something. It's like, But the twitch is like she immediately recognized it as kind of an attack, but on a subconscious level. And the story with her in the books was she was kind of repressed after the Emperor died. So her Force abilities is like she was acting like she didn't have much connection to the Force, and it was like a psychological cocoon. So she didn't realize something was happening to her, but her subconscious kind of did because she's basically ignoring her Force connectivity. So he sees that. Remember, he's also empathic. He can read their emotions. She's very locked up tight. And in that little moment, he gains all that information. He turns back to Talon and basically says, yeah, she does have abilities, and she's somewhat trained. He's like, interesting. It's like, and they have this back-to-back. You can see they are almost friends. They have a history together. And that brings in Mara Jade. It's like, oh, she's going to marry Luke Skywalker later. It's like, not necessarily. But you bring that back in, and suddenly, we are doing Heir to the Empire. It's not Thrawn. It's not Luke. It's that time frame. So you're immediately saying with Talon Karrde and Mara Jade, this is the Heir to the Empire time frame. This is back to the good old Star Wars. This is 3 scenes in, and we have already established more lore, more Force powers, and more legitimacy than Dave Filoni did in 8 episodes of Ahsoka. You see what you can do with good writing. And this is just me talking. This is not all the visual work. This is not all the carefully crafted sets. The entertainment industry has a lot of good people, very skilled people at their jobs, but it all hinges on the writing. If you mess it up, everything goes south. And then you have stunt people that are very good. If you mess up the stunts, it looks stupid. Episode 8 of Ahsoka, the finale, looks stupid. The stunts look stupid. And that's on the director. If he or she is not seeing through the camera what they want to see there, they have to have them redo it. Why did that stuff pass? I mean, it was lame. So what do we see? In this first scene, we have a little bit of comment, just a little bit. You do it exactly right. If you have to do it 10 takes to get it, you do it 10 takes. It doesn't matter. You get it exactly right, and you establish it right. Blasters blast stuff apart. They don't just put a little melty black mark on it. It's like a cigarette burn. That's what it's become now. Blasters are... You shoot someone with a blaster, oh, they got a cigarette burn on their uniform. It's like, no, if you hit them, it should go boom. And they should have a cavity left there. You should see or at least gas, like a gas cloud going out. You reestablish legitimacy just with the basic physics. And this is 3 scenes into the first episode of a new series. If you take the time, if you got a good imagination and you're a detail hound, there's plenty of potential left. So I'm just going to go through what I would do the first episode. So we're 3 scenes in. Long scenes, but 3 scenes. After Talon Karrde strips the ship of all his useful stuff and basically says, put it on my account, and then the Jedi's going to buy stuff from him later based off that account. They go separate ways. And the Judicator, which working title for the ship and show, you see it going through multiple hyperspace jumps. And you actually use a map scene. And you show it, jump, jump, jump. So you don't think, oh, it's just magical. We got wherever we want to go in the galaxy in 10 minutes. The map scene done in a way to suggest a length of time has passed. And you show multiple jumps to get to their destination. And you also get to see a map. One thing Star Wars has not had forever is a map. I remember the first time they attempted to put one out was just a few years ago, and it was a kind of a lame map. It was 2D, flat. For those of you who don't know, our galaxy is approximately 100,000 light years wide, and the piece we're in, the flat piece we're in, is 1,000 light years thick, and we're about in the middle. That means 500 light years of stars above us and 500 light years of stars below us. Today, with digital technology, we can do a 3D map. Star Wars should have a 3D map of the galaxy. So we start implementing that in this little cutscene of travel time, we show them a little bit of that actual map. We don't have to make up the entire map before we show it. We just have to make up this little piece, make sure it's legit, and show them that, and then we can start filling in stuff later. When they get to their destination, you have a scene with Dala and the Jedi on the bridge. They're standing next to the window. And having an actual window, not a green screen, an actual window with a screen outside it. I saw they now have rooms with projection screens. It's like a holodeck. Production companies have this. I saw it in a Tom Cruise movie. One of the best movies he's made, space movie. It had Morgan Freeman in it. The name is not coming. Anyway, they filmed it on one of these sets, and they built the sky tower in the middle of this so they could put sunsets or storms or whatever they wanted out there, and the actors could act in the middle of it. So you build the Star Destroyer bridge with actual windows, and you put similar projectors outside the windows. So you can have a scene where the Jedi and Dala are standing right next to the window at the very front of the bridge, and they're looking out, and the actors are actually seeing what's happening. And you see through the camera through the window, and it looks legit. It doesn't look green screen. See, little production details like that matter, like making a full set. You don't make part of a set and do the rest digitally. You make a full practical set. The original trilogy was done with practical stuff because George Lucas didn't have that much CG technology back then. So to tie you visually back to the original trilogy, you make it practical. Then it feels like Star. In the Star Destroyer, you don't make a CG Star Destroyer. You do a miniature. You do a miniature and you film the miniature. Until you can get to the point where the CG looks like the miniature. If you can get there, which they're getting close now, if you can get there, then you can do it all digital. Until you do, you use models. Because you immediately look at models and they look real. The Battle of Endor looked real because they were real models. The last Starfighter movie came out about the same time, and they pioneered the digital technology. It doesn't hold up to models at all. It wasn't bad for the time. Models are the standard, and you have to use models until you get the equivalent out of digital. I said they're close. I don't think they're quite there yet. So after going through these map jumps, you see them coming into a system. The Jedi and Dala are on the bridge. You start them having a conversation with a hyperspace swirl, and then they come out. And she is no longer in her Imperial uniform. So this is like days, if not weeks later. And in this conversation, it's basically come to the point where he wants to recruit her. And the crew, he's already offloaded. And he tells her, well, I've either sent them back to Warlord Zinzi, which she was working for. So you now add Warlord Zinzi to the lore. She was working for him because he picked her up. He basically assumed control of her cargo ship and other assets. He saw her skills, and he promoted her back to captain of that Imperial Star Destroyer. So she's been kind of loyal to him, but he's a pig. I mean, he's an evil pig. That's what Zinzi is. So the Jedi tells her, well, the crew I've already dispatched, they're either going back to Zinzi, or they're going to Thrawn, or they're going to the New Republic, or if you're going someplace. Basically, he let them choose. He didn't want to keep them captive. He let them choose. So while she was in her quarters and other stuff, she was on house arrest, basically, all her crew are gone. And he took them off, or he had Cray take some off, whatever. They're gone. And he tells her, as they come out of hyperspace, and there's the planet in the distance. It's a greenish white planet. And as they're talking, the planet just gets closer and closer and closer and closer in the background, out the window. So as they're having this conversation, you can see it's just creeping, and it's one of those space shots you don't see enough of. And it gives you the sense of the grandness of space and the galaxy. You want to feel that it's big. So in this conversation, we established she was working for Warlord Zinzi. It was his Imperial Star Destroyer. And the Jedi stole it. He also in this, I'm not going to steal from Thrawn. It's like, that would be too much heat. So stealing an Imperial Star Destroyer is a big deal, but he was not even going to try to steal one from Thrawn. Zinzi, you learn, is working for Thrawn, but he didn't fully accept him back. He didn't fully accept the chain of command. So Zinzi is one of these warlords that's still semi-independent, but he's working with Thrawn because he knows if he doesn't work with Thrawn, Thrawn will come after him. Thrawn knows he doesn't have the resources to come after these warlords. He needs to get them all on page so they can fight the New Republic. So he allows Zinzi and some of the other powerful ones to co-op rather than fully accept his command. So in this conversation, you also realize the reason Daala's Star Destroyer is basically underfunded is because it's not one of those that's going to help Thrawn. Zinzi has basically took his best piece of his fleet and gave him to Thrawn for his duties, and he knows if he doesn't give them the best, he's going to get flack from Thrawn. So the rest of Zinzi's stuff, other than his personal Star Destroyer, it's underfunded, and the assignments he has them on, it's like you're the little brother and you get the hand-me-downs. Again, we're establishing this in a conversation. Conversations are low budget. So don't tell me you can't make extremely good Star Wars because of costs. You just have to do it. You have to know when to put the special effects in and that really expensive stuff. And then the others, you fill screen time with 2 actors talking. Yes, you've got the projector on the back, but that's not CG. The projector is not CG. You CG the projector film, if you want to call it that, and then you just play it back there. But they don't have to actually go into the scene and make it fit in the little windows. And making planets in space, that's pretty easy. So you can fill a lot of screen time with conversations and lore, and it doesn't cost much money. And you're standing on a practical set that you're going to use episode after episode after episode. So during this conversation, we learned she worked for Warlord Zinzi. Her entire crew is gone. He didn't capture them. He didn't kill them. He didn't torture them. He just sent them to where they wanted. He wanted the ship. He didn't want her, even. He wanted the ship. And this is not the first ship he's stolen. It's by far the biggest, but he's stolen from some other warlords before, too. And you don't realize it in this scene, but he's gotten ships from other locations, not stealing. This, as the planet gets bigger and bigger, he explains basically her options. And she basically agrees with him. If she goes back to Zinzi, Zinzi's going to execute her because she lost her ship. And she doesn't want to go to Thrawn. I mean, she could, and the New Republic isn't going to want an Imperial officer. And she definitely doesn't want to be out of command. So he basically offers her, if you work for me, you can have command of this ship back. But you're going to have to learn a lot. Because I don't want an Imperial officer. I want a real captain. And he uses the term light side. We don't hear the term light side in the rest of Star Wars. We hear dark side. So she's going to have to be a captain. She's going to have to be a light side captain. And she's going to have to learn how that's going to be. And then it gets to the point where basically they're getting on this planet. It's getting bigger and bigger on the screen. And he basically references the planet. And he starts to give the backstory of this planet. And during this, he basically says, oh, have a look for yourself. And basically nods to her so she can start doing the captain thing. So she turns to the skeletal crew guy, the guy with sensors, and says, scan the planet. And they say, well, do you want to scan for technology or life forms or blah, blah, blah. Scan for technology. And she found out there aren't very many cities down there. It's just a handful. Most of them are small, maybe a few medium-sized. It's basically an uninhabited planet. Then he says, oh yeah, look again. Scan for life forms. And sensor officer come back and they pop it up on hologram. They pop both up on hologram, the city location. It's full. It is full of people. I mean, you got more than 1 billion at least. And he confides in her, he found this planet some 20, 25 years ago. They had no technology. They were basically primitives. And he came here because other people from other systems, foreigners, were coming in and they were hunting them for sport or for food or whatever. And he sensed he was doing the Jedi thing. He was coming here to help, and he put a stop to that. But he also introduced them to technology because they had none. You can think of them like little frogs, frog people, maybe, taller than Yoda, but actual frogs, frog face, frog mouth. They can't fight worth a damn. So they're basically Ewoks. They're amphibious Ewoks, and this planet is full of them. And the Empire never did anything with this planet because it's not useful to them. So right here, with this planet, you're establishing this is a planet. Stuff happens here that's not connected to Thrawn versus the New Republic. And we have to get this entire series would be based in the rest of the galaxy. It's not Thrawn versus New Republic. It happens at the same time, but it's not there. A galaxy is huge. So when Thrawn versus New Republic is going on, there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening on other worlds. And even the worlds where those events are taking place, a world is huge. So you want to get rid of this notion that, like, every time I hear people say, like in Ahsoka series, well, this is going down. Where's Luke? He should show up. It's Jedi stuff. It's like, it's a huge galaxy. Luke cannot be everywhere. It's like, oh, the Force led me. It's like, you can't say the Force is a fire alarm and everything that happens he immediately knows and shows up for. So this particular Jedi, he's never met Luke. They've never crossed paths. The galaxy is huge. Them not meeting each other, why would they meet? The galaxy is huge. So this entire series would take place in the other stuff, in the other systems. And this planet, Empire never had a presence here because it was absolutely no use to them. And as far as hyperspace routes go, it's not a pass-through system. It's kind of off on the edge. It's mapped, but nobody goes there except these hunters. So when the Jedi came and he stopped the hunting, he basically exposed these guys to technology, first at the hunter base, which he basically took over. And he introduced some other stuff, and it turns out they are really good engineers. And they have been building stuff on their planet with low tech. It's kind of like a beaver dam. A beaver is an extremely good engineer. They can build a dam out of sticks and mud. So if you taught that beaver how to use modern day technology, what could they do with it? So in this conversation with Daala, as the planet's coming up, halfway through the conversation, the Jedi says, actually, halfway through the conversation, the censor officer amends his statement. Wait. When she asked him to scan for technology and infrastructure, so cities, well, you can't scan the backside of the planet. So as they're having this conversation, something orbits around from the other side, and he breaks in. I have an amendment to that. There's an orbital installation coming around the side of the planet. And the Jedi turns and say, okay, take us on a lap around the planet to get there. A low orbit lap around the planet to get there. And the guy asks how low, and he says spectator low. So for the rest of the conversation after this point, the planet is going to get huge. It's going to tilt, and it's going to basically be above their head, and they're going to get a close view. It's like the space shuttle around Earth. You can look down, and you can see the continents, and you can see where the countries are, and you can actually almost see your house. It's that close. It's that low. And they're going to go all the way around to the space station. The rest of this conversation happens on that. So you're seeing the grandness of space out the windows as they're having this conversation. It turns out these people, these frog people, this frog race, once he exposed them to technology, they learn very fast. And all these cities that the sensors picked up, they're brand new since he met them. Now, most of their people aren't living in them, but they're building very fast, and they are very loyal to him. And it turns out, she asked him, basically, do you control this planet? And he says, well, it depends on your meaning of control. And they go into this discussion about chain of command. It's like, chain of command is useful for rookies to keep them from making mistakes. But once you learn your craft, the chain of command actually gets in the way. So the experienced people get rid of it. The Empire never did. They always use chain of command. It's like they're perpetual rookies because of this. And she's like, how can you operate a ship without chain of command? It's like, and he actually says the line, well, good men don't need rules. And that's the way this character and the Jedi are. Good men don't need rules. It's the process of getting them to good men. So he tells her, if you can't trust your crew, then you've trained your crew wrong. You've selected your crew wrong. And it's the job of a captain not just to accept whatever crew, you're supposed to train your crew. You're supposed to weed them out. There are bad people there who won't do what's right. You transfer them out, you bring new people in. So it's like your crew is a garden, and the captain is the gardener of that crew. So you are forever, even if you're just sitting nowhere on patrol or waiting for something, you're constantly working your crew with training drills, feeling them out. So when you get a proper crew, you don't need the chain of command anymore because they're all loyal to the mission. And they trust you because you're not a dick. So he basically is telling her in this conversation how he wants her to be a captain, how the Jedi work. Jedi don't work on rules. Good men don't need rules, which comes from Doctor Who. And she's like, this is all brand new to me. This will never work. It's like, but I want to be a captain again, so if you want to teach me, okay, I'll go with it. I don't want to be dispossessed. Dispossessed is, you hear them in Battletech, mech warrior all the time when they lose their mech. She doesn't want to be dispossessed, so she's willing to learn. And through this conversation, again, this is probably a 10-minute conversation. What are the production costs for having two actors standing on a practical set talking for 10 minutes? Minimal. If you've already got the set built and you've already got the CG outside, it's on a projector screen. Actually filming that, it's cheap. It's good writing. It's good TV. It's cheap to make that piece of it. Other pieces would be expensive, but that's filling 10 minutes of airtime in what, a 40, 45-minute episode with a conversation that's so lore heavy. I would be surprised if the so-called YouTube reviewers didn't use the word loregasm. They would be getting, in these first 4.5 scenes, they would be getting so much lore, it will make their head explode. And you can do it for low cost if you know how to properly do it. We are filling in so much backstory. We are establishing these characters. This Jedi and Dala, just from me telling you this, you've already started to get an idea what they are and what they aren't. So it comes back, he's actually in control of this planet. He owns it, and not just this one. He owns 3 others. So suddenly you have a Jedi owning planets. It's like, wait a minute. Do the good guys own planets? I thought they were only rebels and they stood up and they wanted democracy. Like, this is anti-democracy. This is anti-democracy Jedi. He is not fighting for the Republic. He is not fighting for democracy. Remember, he was around when the Republic fell, and he saw democracy fail. He's not going to repeat that mistake. So when he sees the new Republic come around, he's like, he's not going to help him. He's got his own mission, which nobody knows yet. We don't see it yet. And he does not explain it to Dala yet, but he has his own mission, and he's had it since the very beginning. And his origins, how is he a Jedi? Yoda said all the Jedi were gone except Luke. And yet Ahsoka's still around. It's like they cheated on that. Oh, I'm not a Jedi. I carry lightsabers. I use the Force, blah, blah, blah. I'm not a Jedi. I was expelled. They cheated on that. But you got to remember, Yoda isn't omniscient. He can't see everything. But I will tell you, this Jedi was not trained in the Jedi Temple. He's not from the Yoda line. He's never met Yoda. He's never met any of them. He's never met another Jedi his entire life. Well, then how can he be a Jedi? There's a way, but you don't see it in the first episode. Little breadcrumbs will come up, and one of the arcs of the first season will be, who is this guy, and where is he coming from, and why is he so fucking awesome? He owns planets. He's hijacking Star Destroyers. He's basically doing stuff the other Jedi wouldn't do. It's improper. It's like, but he's not doing it as a villain. And you see all the way, you actually see Jedi for what they're supposed to be. And as a showrunner, one rule you say, okay, this Jedi, in this show, never in this show do you see a lightsaber fight. You're thinking, wait a minute. Lightsaber fights are the bread and butter. You can't get rid of it. He never fights against another lightsaber-wielding opponent. He will use a lightsaber. He will use a lightsaber a lot. And it will be yellow. Originally, it would have been white, but then Ahsoka, they did white there. I don't want to copy that. It's just bad taste in the mouth there. Yellow, like Knights of the Old Republic yellow. He will use a lightsaber, but you will never see him fight an opponent. A training droid with a saber, or maybe two Jedi practice, never an actual lightsaber fight. Why? In Phantom Menace, when they say, oh, the Sith have returned, like, they haven't been around for 1,000 years. Like, what were the Jedi doing with their lightsabers for 1,000 years if they weren't fighting Sith? Why do Jedi carry lightsabers? So in this series, we're going to see what a Jedi does when there are no Sith around, because the Sith are gone. The prophecy of the Chosen One, Anakin will destroy. He did. There's no more Sith. So why would there be lightsaber fights? If Jedi are the only ones with lightsabers, why would there be lightsaber fights? Oh, Bale and Skull, Shin Hati, blah, blah, blah. There would be a few remnants around. People use lightsabers. But this, you would make a decision up front. No lightsaber fights. But he will use his lightsaber a lot. He will use it cutting doors, blocking blaster bolts, and other applications. So you basically see a Jedi being a Jedi, absent Sith. And you do it the same way. You see him dealing with people. You see him commanding people. You see him rescuing. You see him repurposing people. And repurposing is the number one thing here. He's taking people that are broken or lost, and he's recruiting them, and he's training them, and he's making them whole and better. His entire crew, the replacement crew he brings on the Star Destroyer, they're all that. And you start to see what a Jedi is, and we get so much more detail on what the Jedi are. We didn't get it before. We got a whole bunch in Phantom Menace that we never had before. A little more in Attack of the Clones, a little more in Return of the Jedi. In Ahsoka, we got nothing. Except Dave Filoni doesn't know how a lightsaber works. So this series, Judicator, would go heavy into the Jedi lore. But it's not focused on the Jedi character. It's focused on Dala. She's basically the lens through which we see this. And that's why half of it's going to take place on this Star Destroyer. The Jedi is going to pop in and out on various missions. So, I mean, he's going to be there. He's main character. But Dala's, we see through her eyes on a lot of this. So this planet, we learn on this little lap to the orbital station. He controls it. He controls 3 others too. And he's going to make a play for more. Now, these planets, New Republic and Thrawn don't even know they exist. And yes, they might be on the map. Nobody cares about them. There's a lot of the galaxy that nobody cares about. I live in Indiana. And I learned at some point, people refer to this as flyover country. And there's a very good movie called Coming to America, and they make this perfectly clear. It's basically an African kingdom and whatever. And the prince comes over here and they say, we've got all of the United States to choose from. Where do you want to go? New York or LA? And it's like, that would be the attitude of people on Coruscant. It's like, there's only a few planets that matter. And then when Thrawn comes back, I mean, he's going to go after the big ones. So there's a whole bunch of the galaxy out there that nobody cares about. Nobody has the time to deal with. Even the Republic didn't control all systems. Kamino, they didn't own. Kamino wasn't part of the Republic. Tatooine wasn't part of the Republic. So this series would take place in the stuff that was not part of the Republic, not part of Thrawn's Empire. You would see parts that were part of the Empire and then broke off. I mean, when it fragmented into warlords, yeah, those are fair game, but he's not going to mess with Thrawn. And the 4 he has so far, this one they're at is the biggest one population-wise. And the population is loyal to him. Not out of fear, not just out of thanks. They trust him. They trust in the Jedi. One of the recurring themes of this series would be, in the Jedi we trust. In the prequels, we saw the Jedi fucked up. That's not the lingering lesson you want to have with the Jedi. You want to, in the Jedi we trust. I mean, who's more trustworthy to lead your planet than a Jedi? Not a politician. Doesn't matter if you're elected. Being elected doesn't give you skills. It doesn't give you morality. It doesn't give you experience. So this Jedi, he's not messing with the democracy thing. And this planet, they're not either. So he explains to Dala, they'll do what I ask as long as it's not stupid. And if it was stupid, I basically told them, don't do it. Don't follow me if I tell you something stupid. So wisdom is a prerequisite of command. And he's telling her this to explain the planet and also how she has to command in his fleet. Okay. Yes, I could go on for quite a while, but I want to get this part finished. As an object lesson, I mean, the odds of Disney seeing this and suddenly having an epiphany, oh, this is the way to do it, I would not, Vegas would not give you those betting odds. They're that low. But I want you to know how this can be fixed. So at this planet, as they're making their lap, we learn about this race, and we do some cuts down to the surface. So we actually see them in their habitats, and you see the Star Destroyer passing over. So you actually see the planet a little bit here, and you come back up to the Star Destroyer, and he's explaining basically parts of his organization and what he's doing. He's basically carving out his own little empire. Now, if people think, a Jedi would never do that. Oh, yes, they would. This one definitely would. And she kind of comes around to say, well, what's your main objective here? I mean, are you going to make a play against Thrawn? Or are you just, you got a grudge against the New Republic? Why don't you join the New Republic then? It's like, I don't trust the New Republic any more than I do Thrawn. I mean, Thrawn is at least competent. The New Republic can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So he doesn't want to have anything to do with either of them. And she basically, okay, well, what's your play here? And he says, I'm playing the long game. I'm prepping for something far in the future that will make Thrawn and the New Republic look like child's play. And I have to build. So building, repurposing and building. Two major things the Jedi do. We haven't really seen that. Jedi are leaders. We haven't really seen that. The best thing we saw about that was the Clone Wars and the Jedi leading the clones. And that comes back to why does he have clones and Stormtroopers? They were in Stormtrooper armor just to get on board the ship. They don't normally wear that. They don't wear Clone Trooper armor either because they don't have it anymore. So you will later see them in like some kind of a hybrid. Either like they bought on the market or they specifically made for them, whatever. The reason why, you find out later, not this scene, that they're following him is because they feel guilty. These guys betrayed and murdered their Jedi. Not every single clone did that, but at least one of these guys actively shot one of their Jedi because of the chip in their head. And later on, even if they get the chip removed, they feel guilty. So they happened across this Jedi by pure accident. And it's like I said, we want to make up for it. We'll help you. We'll do whatever you want. It's just, we're so sorry. We had no choice. It's like, so he takes them on, and he basically, they're broken. They betrayed their commanders because of a chip in their head. So he is helping to heal and rebuild them and also use them at the same time. He repurposes people, he makes them better, and he puts them to work for him. And then he goes and finds more people and repurposes. It's the way of the light side. This planet of frog people, he's upgrading them, he's helping them greatly, and in return they help him. That's the way the light side works. He came to this planet not expecting any help. He was just there to go after these asshole hunters and knock it. He didn't expect to be there for very long. But say, doing the right thing doesn't always give you something back. A lot of the time you get a slap in the face for it. So he's expecting that. He's expecting nothing in return, and he hits a gold mine. These guys are not only willing to follow his lead, they are great engineers. So when they eventually get to the station, you find out it's a shipyard, and it's a brand new one they have built. And one of the slips is big enough to hold an Imperial Star Destroyer. Remember, he had Talon Crate strip out the stuff he didn't want. This station is going to put back in the stuff he does want. And he's going to turn this ship. He explains it to Dala as they approach. He's going to make this ship fully naval. It's not going to carry troops. It's not going to carry walkers. It's just meant to fight other warships. So if it comes up against another Imperial Star Destroyer, after the refit, it will win easily. And she says to him, you want it to become a predator? And he says, no. I want it to become an anti-predator. Predators go after the weak and the helpless, basically like cargo ships. This is designed to go after predators, to go after warships, to stop them in their predation. An anti-predator stops predators. It doesn't hunt and eat predators. It stops them. And in order to do that, it has to be as strong or stronger than the predators. And for Dala, that lesson, it clicks in right there. Because her whole thing is you got to be the strongest, otherwise you're the victim. So right there, he gives her a light side reason to be strong, and she just grabs onto it because it makes sense. He reads her very well, and rather than manipulating her, he gives her bits and pieces of truth that she needs. So this would be like halfway through the episode when they get to this station. I'm not going to go through the rest of the half because this is already getting long. But basically, he stays with her for a bit. They've been together for a few weeks already on this journey. And then he can't stay there and train her. He's got way too much else to do. So another ship jumps in days later to pick him up and take him. He's got to do other stuff. He's going to leave her there during the refits, and she's going to start assembling crew. He's going to give her more crew, and she's got to start working them out. He assigns her an executive officer who has the authority to overrule her orders and, if necessary, remove her from command. He is going to be Dala's conscience until Dala learns how to be a proper captain and a proper light side captain. And the person he sends is the captain of his flagship. And the ship that comes in, you realize it's a Jedi Star Cruiser. And it's green. They painted it green. Green and gold, with some gold, mostly green. And the uniforms the crew have are also green and gold. And you start to see this other motif, and you learn he started all this out. He explains this again to Dala. A lot of this show would be, first episode, him talking to Dala or Dala talking to other people. You can do a lot with dialogue if you do it properly. You can't just say, talk for 10 minutes and we're good to go. It's like, no. The dialogue has to be for a reason. You learn the first acquisition he made in his empire building was a junkyard. It was an Imperial junkyard that they kept under guard to keep people from looting it. When the Empire took over, they got rid of the Jedi Star Cruisers, and they replaced them with Star Destroyers. And what do we see in Dave Filoni's Ahsoka, which is not entirely bad, is the New Republic doesn't want Star Destroyers. They're getting rid of them to replace them with their new ships. And they are junking the Star Destroyers and repurposing the parts. Well, this junkyard is basically that, but the Empire didn't really care about repurposing. They just dumped them there. Sometimes they stripped them of parts, other stuff. So it's a huge orbital junkyard around some speck of a planet. It's an Imperial planet. But when the Empire broke up, it kind of got lost in the mix. So when Jir took it over, no one came to stop him. So now he has a junkyard full of partial ships and complete ships. One of them was a Jedi cruiser, was mostly intact. It was just abandoned there. And there were other Jedi cruisers there in various pieces. Some of them were destroyed in battle, and they just towed the pieces there and junk. So you can pull equipment off those pieces and reattach like Legos to other ones, and he got a Jedi Star Cruiser out of it. And that was his capital ship, or his flagship. And the person he chose to command that was a bounty hunter he came across, which he described as an ethical bounty hunter. And that bounty hunter had been raiding Imperial warships to grab prisoners or cargo off of, and he was very good at it. And he comes across him and said, you know what? If you're so good at, if you know these ships better than the captains, maybe you make a good captain yourself. And there was more to it than that, but basically he recruits him and he makes him, he is basically the Rex to this Jedi. Okay? He's basically the Rex. He's a bounty hunter turned captain. And so when he finds Dala, he pulls this captain off his flagship and puts him in as her executive officer so he can teach her all the stuff that the Jedi taught him. So now you have the Jedi's going to pop in and out in episodes. Focuses on Dala. She has this XO who's her subordinate, but then he's also her superior, and it's kind of, in the chain of command, it doesn't make sense. But remember, the Jedi doesn't want them using chain of command except for basically raw recruits. They have to up their game and become better than that. Dala's never known anything better than that. It's just been the Empire and chain of command completely. So this XO is going to be her conscience. It's going to be her teacher. And as long as she's doing proper stuff, he's going to let her lead. She's going to be the captain. She's going to be assembling the crew, and then he's going to step in when she messes up and explains it. That guy, that captain, it has to be Sam Witwer. Okay? The guy who acted Starkiller for the game Force Unleashed, and he's done the voice of Darth Maul and a bunch of... That's him. Okay? Right there. He's that character. So you have him and Dala, and they're going to have a bunch of dialogue, and basically he's going to be explaining to her what it means to be light side, captain, and all this other stuff the Jedi taught him. And that's going to be a dynamic going forward. And you see the character progression of Dala coming from this Imperial officer who's never smiled. She will never smile on screen again. Okay? That laugh, that's the only one you get. Even as her character progresses, she'll never smile. You give the actress that instruction. When you're on camera, you never smile. But this Sam Witwer XO will gradually teach her, and she will progress into what is a proper captain. Would she have got there on her own? No. A weak moral compass, she would never have got there in the Empire or other places. But because she ran into a Jedi, he makes her better. And he uses her to help make other people better, just like he's using Sam Witwer's character to make other people better. And later on, oh boy, there's a lot there. Let me skip ahead. You later learn the Sam Witwer's character, the XO, is slightly force sensitive. But the Jedi doesn't train him because the Jedi has a rule. I mean, a personal rule, a choice. He won't train Jedi. He won't reestablish the order. Even though it fell, he won't. That's not part of his mission. But he does help people out. So he helps force sensitives out. He'll give them a little coaching here and there, but he's not going to take anything on as his apprentice. He's not going to try to rebuild the order. This is part of this Jedi's character. It makes him different than Luke. It makes him different than Yoda and everyone else. He's not interested in rebuilding the Jedi Order. Which begs, what in the world is he doing? He's building an empire for some future distant threat. What is going on? So right there, he's different from other Jedi. He will not take up Padawan, ever. And he will not try to rebuild the Jedi Order. But he will help people. So in Heir to the Empire, we learned Mara Jade was the Emperor's hand. And one of the abilities she had was she could hear his voice from afar. The Jedi teaches this character, the XO, to hear his voice from afar. It's the one thing he trains him for. Okay? He gives him a little help in other stuff, and he dabbles. He could probably press a button across the room. Force powers, that's about it. But he trains him so he can hear his voice from afar. So if communications go down, he can actually send a message through the Force, and this guy can hear it. Okay? He's not a Jedi. He's never going to be a Jedi. But he can do that. And he can dabble in some other stuff. He is not Sabine Wren, who is now forever known as Sabine Wray, who can go from, I can't use the Force, I can grab a lightsaber, to I can push Ezra across a 20, 30 meter gap. That is as bad as Rey in The Force Awakens. I mean, Dave Filoni, it's like, how can you make that mistake twice? After all the flack Rey got, how can you do that with Sabine? Well, this character, this Exo, he'd be the exact opposite. He's low force sensitivity, but he can use the force, and you can see him, he dabbles with it as kind of a side project. But the Jedi trained him for this one thing, so he can communicate with him. It's not two-way, it's one-way. That you would probably not even learn about until season 2. And then the big thing, how did this guy become a Jedi? Well, it gets complicated. And it goes back to when Yoda was a Padawan. So this is like Grogu's growth rate kind of throws a monkey wrench and stuff. Saying, oh, well, Yoda lived 900 years because his species grows. You might want to trash that. So how old is Yoda when he's a Padawan? Is he like 50 or is he like 200? I would say more like 50. So Yoda's a Padawan. He can talk. This whole thing about Grogu not talking is kind of ridiculous. Yeah, he can use the Force, but he can't talk. So Yoda's a Padawan back in the Jedi Order long, long ago. And his master is basically, you see where he gets a lot of this bad philosophy from. His master was on the Jedi Council. And there was this other Jedi on the council who did not get along with the other council members at all. He claimed to be pure light side. And the other Jedi said, no, you can't do that. Everyone's at least a little dark side. You got to guard it. No, I'm pure light side, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. So basically, he's like Qui-Gon, only on steroids. And he basically is in exile. Not officially. They didn't kick him out of the Jedi Order. It's like he wants to go on missions anyway. So he goes on missions, and he's away from the Jedi Temple, and they just kind of stay apart for the most part. And whenever he comes back, there's always an argument between Yoda's master and this guy. Well, this guy is pure light side, just like Coder, full alignment. And he foresees a really big threat in the future, more so than the Sith. And he knows the key to this is going to be after he's dead. He's not going to be able to fight this. But there is this one other guy. He can see it in the future. Not chosen one, but sort of this. He's going to be light side, full light side, just like him. But he's going to be born after he dies. So how's he going to do? He builds a training facility. Jedi Order does not know about it. He builds it elsewhere. He fills it with holocrons he personally made. Records from the Jedi Temple. Builds training equipment we've never seen. Cool training. Yes, if you force imbue certain objects with things like a wall, you can get it through. You can force push it, and the wall bounces the force push back, so you can practice blocking. So you throw it, and you practice blocking all by yourself. Then Kamasi is a race in a book, and there were Kamasi monks, and I wanted to use those. He makes an agreement with a group of Kamasi monks. He knows the planet. He knows the street corner where this other guy is going to be. He doesn't know when. So these Kamasi monks who take care of the training facility for him, they watch the street corner for hundreds of years, waiting for this specific series of events that he has foreseen in the Force. He can't tell them when it is. When it happens, there's this kid. And he's like 11, 12 years old. And they grab him. Okay? Not kidnap him. It's like he was poor on the street and barely survived, whatever. But he's full light side. And if you're not willing to cheat and steal on others, well, stealing isn't dark side always. I mean, if you steal from someone who actually needs it, it's dark side. So basically, they find him and they pick him up and they take him to this training facility. And they say, okay, and they turn on the entry hologram, and it's like the guy who's long since dead, the old Jedi Master, explains to him, you're my new apprentice. And even though I can't train you in person, I've left this entire facility to train you for what you need coming, because there is this huge monster threat coming in the future, and you are the key to stopping it. And that is how this guy becomes a Jedi without having any connection to the Jedi Order. So this happens. They find him before, actually a little bit before Phantom Menace. Well, let's see. Yeah, it's a little bit before Phantom Menace. So he's at this training facility, training himself during the prequels, and then he's already off in the galaxy starting to do stuff when the Jedi Order falls. It's like, that's not his concern. That's not his mission. His master said, don't have anything to do with them. Don't reveal yourself to them. Keep separate. You've got to stay focused on this big mega threat. So when the Empire comes, well, why didn't he go stop the Emperor? It's like, how? Is he just going to knock on the door and say, I want a lightsaber fight? He was like, no. So he just ignores it. He doesn't like what's happening, and he helps people and small planets doing. He helps. So he's basically the Rebel Alliance himself, but he doesn't join the Rebel Alliance. He doesn't help them. He keeps it safe. It's like, they don't have a chance anyway. And then when they actually succeed, it's like, wait a minute. There's no way that happened at Endor, the way they said it. There has to be more of the story, but whatever. It happened. He's got his own mission. So this entire series would be his mission happening in the background of the main events of Star Wars. And you get to see what the Jedi are supposed to be. Not what they were in the Old Order, but what they were supposed to be. So in effect, he is trained as a knight of the Old Republic. But not a Force ghost, by someone who is long since dead, who left all this training equipment, all these holocrons, specifically designed for this guy. Which means, even if he doesn't have a higher midi-chlorian count, he's going to be more skilled than Luke Skywalker in the timeline. Whether or not they meet up later, you don't have to. You can have this entire series, he never meets Luke Skywalker, because they got separate objectives. Luke Skywalker's trying to help the New Republic. He doesn't give a shit about the New Republic. That democracy stuff, it's just going to fail again. He has to prepare the galaxy for what's coming. Now the question is, what's coming? What's bigger than the Empire? Like, I'm running long, but I want to get this in. His master died because he went off to chase a planet where there's a huge dark side threat. He felt it. He basically told the council, we have to go get this before it comes after us. And they said, no, we don't feel it. If there is something out there, we'll wait until it shows itself and then we'll deal with it. So he went on his own to deal with it. Same planet that Revan went to. And he got lost. Okay? The Exile went after Revan. He got lost too. Don't know what happened to them. I don't care for the Old Republic. The game that came after KOTOR 2, I just don't even recognize that. I didn't play it. I saw the cutscenes and no. Revan comes back, no. So in my mind, Revan was still lost. So this master goes, this is after Revan. He goes to this planet, sensing the dark side threat. We need to nip this in the bud. He dies there. He takes a lot of them with him, but there are Force users there. They are not Sith. They are the ones who train the Sith in dark side techniques. So the Sith were originally fallen Jedi Knights. And those fallen Jedi felt the dark side there. They went there as a group, like 20 or 30 of them, seeking out dark side power, and they got massacred by the people there. There was an outpost there, all dark side users, not a lightsaber amongst them, another race entirely. And they killed them one by one, like kind of as a game, also teaching them some stuff. And they kind of played it like Hunger Games. And they got finally down to 2. And they said, okay, you two fight to the death, the winner. We'll release you back into the galaxy. You can go hunt the Jedi. Bravo to you. But they wanted the Jedi dead because they're not dark side or light side. They couldn't leave the planet. Their orders were to stay on the planet. They're an outpost. So if they couldn't kill the Jedi, well, we'll train this guy just for the fun, give him a few dark side techniques, and send him back out there. And that was the start of the Sith. So the Sith are defined by the Jedi arts combined with these dark side techniques. And then the Sith added little bits of stuff as they learned as they went along. That's why when Sidious is destroyed and Vader with him, that line of knowledge is gone. So the Sith are gone. Even if someone wants to go to the dark side and pick up a red lightsaber, that doesn't make him a Sith. They don't have that dark side combined with Jedi knowledge. So going forward, that's completely gone. It's over. You can't keep bringing back the Sith. You got to do something else. So this bigger threat are the people who train the Sith. And on this planet, it's a lava planet, and there's one city, one outpost. Everything else is desolate. It's a race. They can all use the Force. All dark side. If someone's born in who can't use the Force, they kill them. If someone is light side, they kill them. So they're a servant race of an even bigger race. And we saw it in Coder. It's the Rakatan, the Infinite Empire. Now, the term Infinite Empire was a lame term, unless it means something else. I would have it mean their empire spanned multiple galaxies. Not 2 or 3, like dozens of galaxies. That's why they call it the Infinite Empire. And then in the Star Wars galaxy, the Rakatan there somehow lost their ability to use the Force. So they basically freaked out and quarantined it. And those in there died. But all the Rakatan and their servant races, everyone else, they're still alive. They're still out there in the galaxies, but they won't touch this one. So one of their servant races was designated to hold this outpost and watch. And if they could, learn what happened, but not to do anything else. So you've got this servant race of dark side users who are more skilled in the dark side than any fallen Jedi could ever hope to be. They teach the first of the Sith. And it's that planet with that outpost on it that the Master goes to because he senses the threat. He can't. He kills some of them, he can't kill all of them, and they kill him. And that's how he dies. Yoda and the rest of the Jedi Order, they all sense his death. It's like a Superman scream across the galaxy. They know he died. They don't know where, they don't know how. They can't sense the dark side threat there. They're blind to it because they're not full light side. So that's how he dies. But he had already created the training facility and set that in motion. So then, what is this? 800 years later, that kid shows up on that street corner. The Kamasi monks grab him. They stick him in the training facility, and he teaches himself to be a Jedi using his master's instructions. So he has a master that he has never actually met. So he's basically been on his own the entire time. And the Kamasi monks, you will see them the first series as kind of a confidant. They're the only peers he has. Everyone else, he's smarter than, faster than, stronger than. The Kamasi monks are the only ones he can they're like his counselors. They're his Deanna Troi, if you want to use Star Trek reference. Everyone else he's better than. So if he does meet Luke Skywalker later, which he doesn't have to, if he does, he'll kind of end up being a peer, which he's never had before. But I would almost say don't have him meet Luke. I kind of want him to, but it's like if they met, it would be crossing paths. They wouldn't join up because he's got his own thing. Luke's with his sister especially. They're pro-democracy. New Republics, we got to say, and this guy doesn't. I don't care. It's doomed to failure. I'm not going to mess with it. So I'm going to keep doing my thing out here and fly over a country where nobody else really cares about. And his long game, and the reason why he's 70 but he looks 30, remember, if you're a full light side alignment or a full dark side alignment, you get bonus powers. The dark side tears you up. I mean, in exchange for your power, quick and easy power, but it eats you up. So it shortens your lifespan. Light side would be the reverse. So if you're full light side, you don't grow old. And the closer you get to light side, the slower you grow old. So was Yoda really 900 because of his species? Maybe his species lives to about 500. And because he was partial light side alignment, he ended up living to 900. So you should see Jedi living longer, if they don't get killed, than other people. This guy, his master, gradually earned his full light side alignment. But what's unique about this character, he was born full light side. He's never known anything else. And that comes from a book. I don't remember which one. iJedi. It was about Cornhorn. And there's a line in there, he says, well, I figure 5% of the people in this galaxy are born light side, and they just stay there. They don't want to go anywhere. And 5% of this galaxy are born dark side. They stay there. They don't want to go. But the other 90% of us can go either way. That's where this comes from. So, say, this guy, he was born full light side. So even before he knew how to use the Force, he was getting the benefits of that full light side alignment. His master knows about this because he earned it. He started out gray, and he earned full light side. He knows his apprentice is going to start out full light side, so he can play the long game. So this long game against the Rakatan, the Infinite Empire, he's preparing for hundreds of years in the future. Hundreds of years past the Battle of Endor. So he has to start somewhere. He has to start building an empire that can actually defend the galaxy. You can't do that overnight. New Republic's not going to do it. The Empire's trash anyway. So he just has to start from scratch. And the first thing he can get his hands on is that scrapyard. So his objective, his long-term mission, is to build. It's not to lightsaber fight. It's not to build a new Jedi Order. It's to build planets. It's to build up individuals. It's like a rising tide lifts all boats. When you're around a Sith, they corrupt everything. When you're around the Jedi, you get better. You get upgraded by being around Jedi. So this series, we would see what a Jedi really is, and all the stuff he does other than lightsaber fighting. How he handles politics, I mean, it's shotgun politics. He does not put up with crap. And Jedi should not put up with crap. A concept from Doctor Who, which I just kind of picked up, is what I call unapologetic righteousness. And that's the way the Jedi should be. There shouldn't be any hesitance. Oh, I have to respect the government. I have to respect the senators. I have to respect democracy. No. You just do the right thing, and you don't give it any ifs, ands, or buts about it. So he is here in the background of all the other events, all the other shows in Star Wars. You can still keep doing. Because this show, Judicator, would happen in the background alongside them. And you can fix the canon as you go through. Now, how do you fix the canon? Well, like the sets for that Imperial Star Destroyer, those are locked in. That's what an Imperial Star Destroyer looks like. So any other show that needs to use it, you know what they look like. You can use those same sets. You don't have to build new sets. And if you do build new sets, you have to do it exactly the same. So you would start establishing a new rulebook, a new canon, through the series for all future series to base off of. And that's how you reboot without actually rebooting. And I've been talking so long, my voice is starting to go out. So I'm going to end it there. That's one way of many you could save Star Wars. If you want to bet if they would actually do that, it's thrown away money. They're not. If I was betting money, I would say Star Wars is a dead duck. But it doesn't have to be. And if it is, learn from their mistakes. Both you as individual writers and other corporations that with franchises learn from their mistakes. It's not unsalvageable, but if they don't change course, and a novice cannot fix this. You have to have an expert writer do this. And yes, I count as an expert writer. I hope from everything I just said, you can start to see why. Dave Filoni is not. Dave Filoni is actually making this worse. Now, maybe he's got an arm tied behind his back, but I'm pretty sure Kathleen Kennedy doesn't care whether a lightsaber cuts through a zombie stormtrooper or not. He messed that up on his own, along with other stuff. So, I'm not giving him a pass. Star Wars can be saved, but you got to do it the way I said or another similar way. If it keeps going the way it's going, you may see Disney selling it. They may have to. They may not have enough money to keep it. And what are the odds that somebody else would take better care of it? I don't know. It's a sad mess, but it's fixable. And you can start fixing it with one good series. And then use that series as the new canon without retconning the original 6 movies. you keep those because those are canon. Okay, I'm going to go get back where it's warm. And I'll do another of these videos another day.